Argument. The state's belated request that the court grant use immunity for Guiterrez testimony at trial and order her to testify at trial, as well as its untimely addition of Guiterrez to its sixth witness list, comes months after Guiterrez was disclosed on defendant's witness list, weeks after Guiterrez' entirely non-substantive pretrial interview was completed, well after the deadline for adding witnesses, and just weeks before the trial is set to begin. Well, some of this just doesn't matter, right? So it doesn't matter that it was after the deadline for adding witnesses, because Hannah Guiterrez was, as the defense concedes in its first point here, that disclosed on the defendant's witness list, which was incorporated by proxy. Just because something is happening just weeks before trial is set to begin doesn't mean it gets excluded from the trial. There can be no good cause for the state's untimely request. The state has known about Guiterrez's involvement in this case since 2021, has known that she was on the defendant's witness list since mid-April, has known that she intended to assert her Fourth Amendment privilege since early May, which is only a month ago, folks. If the state wished to secure live and unfettered testimony from Guiterrez despite her ongoing appeal of her criminal conviction, something the state has known about since March, it should have made this request well in advance to allow all parties a fair opportunity to explore Guiterrez Reed's testimony. Well, we still have a month before the trial. There's still time to question Guiterrez. Everybody's aware of what she has to say. The defense has also known about Guiterrez Reed and her relevance to Alec Baldwin's legal jeopardy since the event in 2021. They know she was tried. They know she's testified. They know about the prison recordings. They certainly have not been ambushed. They just would much prefer that Hannah Guiterrez not be subject to cross-examination in Baldwin's trial. The defense continues, the state's request is not only untimely, is it though, but also prejudicial. Now, keep in mind, folks, everything opposing counsel submits as evidence is presumably prejudicial to your own case. That's why it's being offered by opposing counsel, because it helps them and it hurts you. So the mere fact that evidence is prejudicial doesn't mean it's excluded. Everything offered by the other side is prejudicial. Alec Baldwin's own police interview, his interrogation, the day of the shooting, is prejudicial to Alec Baldwin. You think that's coming into evidence? It sure is. The parties have concluded the pretrial interview process and are fully engaged in preparing for trial. Well, isn't all this part of preparing for trial? Including preparing for the state's 44 timely disclosed witnesses. This is rich because the prosecution is really 2 attorneys, maybe 3. The defense has something like 8 or 10 or 12 attorneys. So to argue that, oh my gosh, Your Honor, we're having so much trouble preparing for the state's 44 witnesses, the vast majority of which the defense has known about for years, it comes across as rather specious. Moreover, days before it filed this request, the state disclosed hundreds of Guiterrez Reed's prior statements for the first time. These are the prison recordings. By the way, the defense could have had those at any time. They knew that they existed because they were referenced in Guiterrez's sentencing. So again, this is not ambush evidence for the defense. The defendant understood from Guiterrez's interview process that she would not, in fact, be available for trial and has been preparing accordingly, with no indication that the state had anything else in mind. So, they know she exists. They know immunity is a thing. Allowing the state use immunity at this late juncture to introduce a previously unavailable witness with hundreds of previously undisclosed statements, the prison recordings, after the deadline for witness disclosures has passed, without time to conduct proper pretrial interviews, and just weeks before a complex trial, would prejudice defendants' due process rights. Let's see. Indeed, it is hard to imagine how the state could claim that this belated disclosure and request is not prejudicial when it previously asserted that it was prejudiced by the defendant's timely witness disclosures. characterizing those disclosures as a calculated game of sandbagging, as less than 30 days remain for conducting pretrial witness interviews, and the defense as choosing to lie in wait and ambush the state because the state would not have an adequate opportunity to conduct interviews and investigate the witnesses with an entire month remaining of the pretrial interview period. Well, of course, this is comparing apples and oranges. So what the defense had done was on the last day added a bunch of witnesses to their witness list that had never been previously disclosed to the state, that the state had never been aware of, were not on the state's radar, could not have been on the state's radar. And the state objected, saying, hey, we reserve the right to exclude these witnesses because we may not have time to interview and investigate these people. We never heard of these people before. And there's a bunch of them. That's a completely different scenario than the state saying, hey, you know what? We may want to cross-examine Hannah Guiterrez, who everybody knows about, who has tons of prior statements, both in police interrogations prior to her own trial, the prison recordings. Everybody had Hannah Guiterrez on their radar. These are not similar situations. Here, a continuance is not required or sought because the state has not made any specific showing as to why Guiterrez's live testimony trial is necessary. Well, they have, actually. They made clear that Hannah Guiterrez would testify about Baldwin was inattentive during his safety training, failed to show up for other safety training, could have checked the gun for live ammo. Other actors on the set were doing that. The state offers no explanation as to how it contends that the defendant's opposition to this motion is a clear indicator that the defendant intends that only exculpatory testimony from Ms. Guiterrez be presented to the jury. The parties have anticipated, since at least May 19th, that Guiterrez Reed would be unavailable to testify. But her testimony will be in the trial because it's in recordings. It's just that the defense believes that the recordings are more favorable to them than harmful. What they don't want is they don't want a live Hannah Guiterrez to be subject to cross-examination by the state. The state has offered no justification for why, at this late stage, it is necessary for the court to grant its request for use immunity. Well, that'll be for the court to decide, won't it? For that reason, the court should deny the state's request for immunity. So that's it for the Hannah Guiterrez immunity issue. That's the defense objections. Not very compelling argument.